So, up in Dome Valley, just north of Auckland, there's a proposal for a huge new landfill. And, it's doing way more than just raising a few environmental concerns. It has actually split the local Maori iwi, Ngāti Watua, right down the middle. We're talking about a serious battle that's pitting community members against their own leaders over land, over money, and maybe most importantly, over trust.
And right at the heart of this whole thing, you've got two totally different stories trying to explain a major change of heart. On one side, you have a leader saying the iwi simply ran out of puthea, that's money, to keep up the legal fight. But on the other side, a community member is claiming that money wasn't the problem. It was actually the reason for the change.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at how this landfill really divided the community. Then we'll get into the leadership's side of things, their pragmatic position. After that, we're going to dig into the community's unanswered questions and these really serious allegations of broken trust. And finally, we'll talk about why this whole situation matters for everyone.
Okay, so here's where it all kicks off. A huge multinational company called Waste Management gets the green light for a brand new landfill. Well, as you can imagine, that immediately set off years of protests and some pretty intense legal battles from local groups and members of Ngāti Watua. They were all fighting to protect the area, especially the Kaipara Harbour nearby.
Now let's switch gears and look at the official story from the Runanga, which is the governing council. We're going to hear from one of its members, Joe Pihema. And his story is really key here because, get this, he used to be one of the biggest opponents of the landfill.
Yeah, listen to this. This is him in his own words. He was out there on the front lines, marching, holding a placard, totally with the protesters. So this isn't someone who is for the landfill from day one. Far from it.
So, what changed? Well, he says the big shift happened when he got elected to the Runanga. From that new seat at the table, he started seeing a whole different side to this fight, a side you just couldn't see from the protest line.
And this is really the crux of his whole argument. The iwi had already burned through several $1 million fighting this thing in court. And that money was coming from a pretty small asset base they got from their treaty settlement. The reality was, fighting a legal war against a giant corporation was just bleeding them dry.
So you can see the dilemma, right? The Runanga was basically caught between a rock and a hard place. They had a political duty to fight the landfill for their people. But they also had this fundamental legal duty to manage the iwi's money responsibly and make sure there was something left for future generations.
But that's not the whole story. Not by a long shot, according to community member Mikaere Miru. He argues that just focusing on the money completely sidesteps a whole bunch of critical questions. Questions about the environment, about ethics, and about protecting their culture.
First up, and this is the big one that kicked off all the protests in the first place, the environment. You see, this landfill is planned for the very top of a river system that feeds right into the Kaipara Harbor, which is an incredibly important ecosystem.
What Mir is saying here is pretty straightforward, and honestly, it's chilling. No one, he says, has ever been able to give them a 100% ironclad guarantee that leachate, that's the toxic garbage juice that drains out of landfills, won't eventually leak into the groundwater and poison everything downstream.
All right, next up, Miru brings another layer into this whole mess. He raises a really serious question about the group that actually approved the project, Auckland Council. Were they really a neutral party in all this?
He's basically saying there's a major conflict of interest here. He claims the council is pretty much in business with waste management. And if that's true, it makes you question the fairness of the entire approval process from the get-go.
And then you've got this really tough question. How do you even begin to protect something as important as tikanga, the tribe's cultural values and practices, when it's right next door to a massive commercial garbage dump?
So the solution they came up with? Apparently, it's a digital dashboard. And, Mira's reaction is basically, are you kidding me? He sees it as this empty, techie fix for a deeply spiritual and cultural duty. It makes him question how seriously they're taking this responsibility at all.
So you add up all these unanswered questions, and they start to paint a much bigger, much more troubling picture. A picture of broken trust, where some are saying the leadership didn't just make a tough call, they went against the direct wishes of their people.
Now, to really get what's going on here, you need to understand this concept of a rahui. Think of it as a temporary but sacred ban or prohibition. In this case, a conservation rahui was placed on the land. This was a powerful cultural and spiritual action meant to protect the area and specifically stop the landfill. It's a really big deal. So Miru just lays out the timeline of events, and it's pretty damning.
In 2019, they placed the sacred Rahui. Then in August 2020, the tribal council makes it official. No more landfills in their territory. Period. And yet, sometime after all that, the very same leadership bodies who are supposed to represent the people allegedly go and sign secret deals with Waste Management.
And this slide just lays it out, plain as day. You can't really miss the contradiction here. On the left, you have a clear, unambiguous command from the tribe. On the right, you have an action from leadership that seems to fly directly in the face of that command.
I mean, the accusation here is huge, that their own leadership has gone rogue, that these massive decisions were made in secret, and that the people, the iwi, have absolutely no idea what's in these agreements that were signed, supposedly, on their behalf.
Okay, so what do we make of all this? When you step back, you see there are two completely different stories being told here, two totally different versions of what it means to be a leader. In one corner, you have this story of pragmatic leaders who say they were forced by the hard numbers to make a painful choice to protect their people's future. But in the other corner, you've got a story of broken trust, where sacred law and the community's voice were allegedly trampled on for a deal. This isn't just about one landfill. This is a story playing out all over the world, showing just how hard it is for modern indigenous leaders to balance money, culture, and the will of their people.
And that really just leaves us with this one big, difficult question to chew on. When a community is this broken, when trust is gone, and there are two completely different ideas of what is right, who actually has the right to decide what the future looks like?